Hey Casper Warriors, what I'm about to share with you is so insane. You will learn all the important main lines in the Italian opening. No dubious tricks, no cheap traps, and no unsound lines that do not work in serious tournaments. And just a disclosure, this will be the complete version of whatever Italian opening I've covered on this channel, because I noticed that you might have missed some of these amazing gems. I mean, a number of you guys who are watching. So stay tuned and don't skip. Say white starts with pawn to e4. You just go pawn to e5, equalizing on the center immediately. And after knight f3, you simply go knight c6. And if white plays bishop c4, which is the Italian, for now, I recommend you play the two knights defense with knight f6. One of the reasons why most amateur players avoid the two knights is that they fear the possibility for white to play the fried liver attack. So that's the first line we're going to address in today's video. And the second line that we are going to address is the normal pawn to d3 line, which I call the d3 Italian. Then we're also going to cover the knight c3 line, and finally the most confrontational d4 line. So knight g5, what do? White is double attacking the f7 pawn. Again, play simple chess, go pawn to d5, because at least your pawn is defended twice by your knight and queen, but you don't need to take immediately on d5. Avoid going into tactics. So just go knight a5, solve the immediate threats that you see on the board. Don't try to go into some funny tactics hoping that your friend or your opponent won't see your dirty tricks or traps or whatsoever. That's not how chess works. Anyway, bishop b5 check is the top played move. Now wait, once again, c6 is the main move in this position. But again, if you are not good at solving tactics, these are kinds of lines you want to avoid. Play simple chess, so better go bishop d7. This poses a new threat on this bishop. I mean, if white takes, they are just helping you to develop quickly. Who knows, maybe you might even want to castle long, changing your strategy. Now wait, some beginners may be afraid of this move, pawn to b4, but that can't happen due to bishop takes. Simple board vision exercise. This is why we encourage people to solve chess puzzles and tactics. The more you solve puzzles, the more you get familiar with the board and the squares. Anyway, seeing that you are now attacking the d5 pawn twice and for nothing, most of your opponents are going to play knight c3 anyway. But what can they do? You just take, and after knight takes, you take back. If queen f3, it's up to you to exchange queens to go straight into the endgame, or play queen d7 and later on knight c6, bishop c5, and castle short. Anyway, castle short, h6, this here coming down is your yard, and that half of the board going up is your opponent's yard. Never should you entertain your enemy's pieces in your yard for too long. That's just a basic principle. So knight f3, let's say, it's up to you to go knight c6, bishop d6, followed by castle short, or just castle long immediately. This is one beauty about this type of two knights defense. So what have you learned so far? Simple chess, simple basic chess. Let's look at one last line involving the knight g5 variation, where you go pawn to d5 immediately, and after pawn takes, you attack that bishop. By the way, if bishop b3, you just take. If bishop b5 check, again, remember to go bishop d7. Anyway, people nowadays don't even take this light squad bishop. They play something like queen e2, waiting for you to take so that they take, they activate their pieces. But as you can see, you have no major threats in your territory. Whenever white makes a move, try to identify your weaknesses in your territory, inside your yard. So you just go bishop d6 in this case, you see, defending that. And if pawn to d4, let's say an aggressive move, you know what? Chess puzzles and tactics will make it easier for you to spot moves like castle short in this position, because you know that if pawn takes happens, that will just be a free pawn. I mean, white can take with a queen due to rook e8. All this knight e6, adorable. I didn't see that. Nope, I did. First, we can take that knight for free if we want, or better play bishop takes b5, so that even if knight takes happens, we have rook takes e5 with check. At the end of the day, we are going to emerge with a clear piece up. Again, don't forget, the link to this study PGN is in the description down below or in the comments section. Anyway, let's look at a different line. Instead of knight g5, another move you might see is pawn to d3. And this is one beauty about the two knights defense, flexibility. First, let me quickly show you to the main line, bishop c5, standard way of playing. The only thing in this line though is you need to prepare yourself against the gioco pianissimo, c3, d4 ideas and all that. So c3 is the top played move, after which you can play d6, it's fine. Also s6 makes a lot of sense. Even cast a shot, we are still talking about the flexibility aspect here. So most people play d6, which is fine. If they don't play d4 and d takes, I mean, you have all the time to play bishop b6 now, so that after d4 you even consider taking or playing queen e7, one of my favorite moves in chess, because now you are not going to exchange queens. If moves like bishop g5, for example, you have h6, and if bishop that, never be afraid of bishop h4 ever again due to pawn to g5. They always lose this pawn. I mean, this time you don't even have to take due to rook e1 in the near future. And this is another reason why we delay castling short, by the way, because we do not mind sacrificing the pawn on g5. This is another line you need to memorize over and over if you are an e4, e5 player. You just play h4 and that dark square bishop is dead. Even if they play bishop takes f7 check, it doesn't even matter. Yeah, you can play king d8, whatever you do is okay. So king f8 is what I choose. There's nothing white can do. They may try pawn takes, attacking the knight. De can work here, still trapping that bishop. Simple chess, remember? But at my level, I find hg to be more solid, because if ef happens, now I would play bishop takes. Tactics only for advanced players. If king h1, met. If rook takes, I take with tempo on f2, so that after king takes, queen takes f6 check comes with another tempo. If knight f3, I win the bishop. If queen f3, either ways I win the knight, because whatever white does won't worry me, I'll be safe. There's no checkmate due to king d8. Don't try this at home, play simple chess. Instead of knight g5, you might see pawn to d3, bishop c5, standard way of playing. So c3 is the top played move, after which you can play d6, it's fine. Also, just like I stated, you need to be aware of this move, pawn to d4. If this happens, in this case, you can play bishop b6, and after pawn takes, the main line here is knight g4. You need to sacrifice this pawn on d6 because you have bishop takes or knight takes on f2. So, I mean, white won't have time to take due to, you know, this fork. You're going to walk away with a piece. By the way, there's no pawn takes due to, checkmate. So what do people do here? Some go aggressive with a move, bishop takes f7. But again, you can just take, even if they go queen d5 check, rescuing one piece, hoping that you blunder like this. I mean, solve the immediate threats that you see. Here you can just go king back to e8 and you are safe. There are no any punish checks. This time, if knight g5, you can even play queen f6 or even queen takes d6 immediately, because I mean, who knows, maybe you might even checkmate your opponent in this way. Pep. That's why you shouldn't be afraid of playing pawn to d6 anyways. After pawn takes, you go knight g4, that attacks the f2 pawn. So every advanced player in this position casts short, and after that, that's when you can simply take back on e5 with your g knight. This is the end of the line. So whenever you face the gioco pianissimo, which is this on the board, d3, c3, start thinking of the Budapest Gambit line, where there's a possibility for white to take on e5, allowing you to go knight g4, the same knight move that you make even in the Budapest. Case closed. Another line that you're going to see after setting up your two knights defense initial position is pawn to c3. Now this is called the Ponziani opening Newman Gambit. Sometimes what you do if you don't know a specific opening or a gambit, just play solid chess. Avoid taking anything that you see. For example, here I may consider playing knight a5 immediately. Also bishop e7 makes a lot of sense, or even pawn to d6. So if I don't want to lose anything, I can just play bishop e7 here, because I know if pawn to d4, I simply have d6. That is if I just want to play normal chess. And if pawn takes, I would win back that pawn like this. This time queen e2 doesn't make sense due to knight c5 and knight e6. You always have this knight maneuver, and it's great. If pawn takes, you can even take back with your queen if you want, or with your knight, or with your bishop. Actually, I love taking back with a bishop because I know queen e2 is a sheer waste of time due to castle short once again. You don't need rocket science to see this simple pin. So c3, bishop e7, d4, d6. If pawn takes, you don't even have to take and exchange queens. You have an option to take on e4. That's all you need to know. Now lastly, we'll look at the knight c3 line. Remember, you started with the 2 knights defense, and now this has transposed to the 4 knights game Italian variation. And one golden rule in the 4 knights Italian is, as long as you don't have a bishop on c5, you can freely take on e4, because after knight takes e4, you simply have d5. If white wants to continue playing an eagle game, they have to play bishop d3, the book line. If they take, they are kind of allowing you to develop or activate your pieces towards the center of the board. So they play bishop d3 here, after which you take, and after bishop takes, you don't need to rush with moves like bishop f5. I mean, you're just going to remain with a weird pawn structure, right? Be extra patient when it is time to eat. Anyway, here the move bishop d6 makes a lot of sense. So now, say what if white takes? Well, they are just giving up their bishop pair. In most cases, these doubled pawns along the c file are advantageous for black in the Italian game. Same thing that we see even in the Paris defense. We do not mind having these doubled pawns along the c file. This pawn will be exchanged with white's d pawn in the long run. So after castle short, you can simply castle short. Besides, you still have your bishop pair, so that is justifiable. If d4, you can even advance your e-pawn. Say knight e5, that's what people do. Now you get rid of your weakness like this. I said it, we normally exchange that pawn with that. Anyway, you have moves like bishop b7 in the near future, queen f6. And I mean, you're just way ahead in development if you think about it. If you want to make things interesting, after playing bishop c5 and d3, you may consider playing h6 first to stop bishop g5, very important. If they do the same, the rule is not just to rush with castle short before white does that. You may play pawn to d6, see what they want to do. If knight a4, you have bishop b6. If castle short, it's up to you to castle short as well. Or now go knight a5. After bishop b3, you intend to take, but only after s6. This is another idea to master. Bishop e3, knight takes, pawn takes, and rather than taking to help white activate their rook, here is a new idea for you guys, queen e7. This is for those of you who don't love exchanging queens very early in the opening stage. d4 can be met with pawn takes, or even better, bishop b4. In my opinion, the whole idea of queen e7 is to allow this trade to happen so that you still remain with 2 pawns on the center of the board. Very soon you will play pawn to c6, stopping knight d5 for good, and I mean that's the whole reason we delay castling. Anyway, let me not spoil it much for people who purchase my e4 e5 courses like the Paris defense course. So say white starts with pawn to e4. The move I still recommend is pawn to e5. And since we are still looking at various ways to destroy the Italian opening, let's go with that. Knight f3, knight c6, and bishop c4. The 2 knights defense. First, we are not worried about the fried liver line due to this continuation. d5, if pawn takes, we attack the light squared bishop, and after bishop b5 check, we don't play c6, but instead bishop d7. This comes with a huge advantage for black, especially if white doesn't know exactly what they are doing. Many other times we even go long instead of castling short. By the way, never be afraid of the move before we have bishop takes. We're not going to look at this. I did cover this in my last 2 videos. I mean, that line. The other move you might see after knight f6 is the immediate pawn to d3. And by the way, this is what I call the d3 Italian. Once I see this, I'm just waiting for white to play bishop g5. I want to allow this pin by all means. That's the only thing you need to remember. So that I go h6 and give up my knight like that. In the real sense, I'm just enticing white to give up their bishop pair. And I just want to have more control on the f4 square. That's my target. So after d3, this is where I said you can play bishop b4, forcing c3 and do that. But again, bishop c5 is also great. The only thing you need to keep in mind is maybe white may somehow transpose these to the gioco pianissimo, slow chess. Well, one simple continuation against the gioco pianissimo is this. You just play queen e7. What if white plays pawn to d4 immediately? Well, first we can just take. There's nothing going on. That's the whole point of playing queen e7. Now the pawn is under attack if you think about it. What can they do? cd. Instead of taking right away, we have bishop b4 check, an intermediate move. Let's see what they can do before taking on e4 with a queen. In fact, what I would do in this position is to play pawn to d5 because the pawn is still pinned and you know white can't take. If bishop b5, that's when I would take on e4 with my pawn. I don't want to exchange my queen. Oh, there's bishop takes. That's a blunder due to queen takes, this is check. Now next I'm going to win the bishop. Oh, knight c3 is the knight on f3 that is going to die. So this is one way of countering the gioco pianissimo. Go queen e7 after setting up your two knights defense, because white has no time to play d4, to be honest. They play moves like castle showed, and now this is when you can safely go d6, bishop b6 or s6, depending on your test. I love bishop b6. It's most of the times they do the same, or play rook u1. I have all the time to, you know, play pawn to d6 and castle short if I want to play normal chess. But the move that I'm still talking about is this, bishop g5. Now, since we don't have time to play knight c7 after h6 and that, we can just straight away play pawn to h6. If bishop h4, we go d6 or g5 first. After bishop g3, now we go d6 to overprotect the e5 pawn. Does this position look familiar to you? Let me know. It is in these kinds of positions where we even sacrifice the g5 pawn. If you remember my last tutorial, why? Because if knight takes, we simply trap that dark squad bishop. This is one little trap you need to remember at all times. There's knight takes, but there's so much we can do in this position, guys. First, rook h7 is okay, because, I mean, either ways, white is going to lose a free piece, which is the bishop on g3. We can also play rook h5, kind of trapping the knight as well. Another interesting move is to go bishop g4 right away, since white can't play pawn to f3 due to our monster bishop on b6. So I would play bishop g4 here. If knight f3, now I would go rook h7. Again, if knight g5, this is when I would take, and after knight takes, I'll then go queen takes h7. I want to take the knight and checkmate. If h3, position is too good that I can do whatever I want in this position. I can take, I can sacrifice my bishop, but I'll do this castle long so that if pawn takes, now I have rook h8 and checkmate is unavoidable. So what am I saying? Two plans. After bishop g5, pinning your knight on f6, if you have an opportunity to play h6 and knight e7 to allow bishop takes, do that. But if white plays the gioco pianissimo setup where they put their d pawn on d3 and the c pawn on c3, you may consider going for this queen e7 strategy and sacrifice your pawn on g5 later on, as you saw. Once again, this idea of giving up the knight on f6 is such a brilliant idea if you think about it. You can also play bishop c5 in this position, that's what I said. And frankly speaking, you are doing all these things to invite bishop g5. The top played move is actually castle short in this position after you play bishop c5, after which you can continue playing normally pawn to d6. There's nothing much white can do. Once again, who knows, you may even see your opponents playing bishop g5, rushing out with this move, and this is when you can go h6 after bishop h4, up to you to go g5 and queen e7, then sacrifice that pawn on g5 like we saw. Oh, give up that knight, because we want to play knight g6, right? On the next move, if white takes, without them knowing, they just gave up their bishop pair. And I mean, they just helped us pave the way for the king's rook. That will be our point of attack. Now, still in the d3 Italian, let's look at the last line after bishop c5, where white may play knight c3. Now, be careful of this move, knight c3. Whenever white plays knight c3, always think of their next possible move, which is knight d5, and that will be played after bishop g5. So it is in these kinds of instances where you want to wait. Still go pawn to d6. And let me do this. Check what's happening on leeches. Bishop g5 is the top played move. It has been played in over 1.8 million games. So I'm not just speaking from without. Once again, if you see this move, bishop g5, just know they may want to play knight d5 next, you know. So the best you can do is to go h6. And after bishop h4, up to you to go g5, queen e7, and do what you do. Or straight away play knight e7. With this move, we are just playing with our opponent's mind. This is a psychological move to allow them to take on f6, because by doing so, they think they will ruin our pawn structure on the king side, but not knowing that they just help to pave the way for your king's rook. That will be your point of attack. Not to mention that there's nothing they can do to come to this side of the board. If you think about it, we have knight g6 and knight f4 in the near future. What can they even do in this position? Maybe knight d5. But with knight d5, you know they want to take on f6. So it's up to you to get rid of that knight if you want. at best and play c6. Other moves will follow, or keep your knight, go knight g6. Now they can't take on f6 due to queen takes. If they ever cast a shot, you start smiling because you already have a point of attack in the near future. If queen d2, maybe they identify what you want to do. You simply go c6. You don't want to entertain your enemy's pieces in your territory. This is your territory. So let's say they play knight e3, because what else can they do? Well, in this position, there's a lot you can do. Bishop takes e3 is good, d5 is good, even queen e7, because the next move will be bishop e6. We know they want to castle long, right? What if they do this? Well, we can even start pawn storming like this, go f5, a3, bishop takes, pawn takes, not allowing knight f4 to happen. This is what they do. Now we go a4, bishop that, bishop e6, say bishop takes, queen takes. Oops, most human beings like doing this. Now this is when I would play rook b8 and that idea. We'll straight away go castle short. Once again, see how difficult it is for white to reach our king. It's like in this position, it's only black who is playing. And hey, don't just watch. That's not encouraging at all. To keep this channel alive, you can simply share this video, hit the like button, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you have nothing to say, just type "Thank you, Kaspa" in the comment section down below. Lastly, if you want to go through my study PGNs, such as the one I'm using in this study, you can visit my Patreon page. The link is in the comment section down below. Back to square one. White plays pawn to e4. You are not good enough. You don't know the best defense to play from here. I recommend you go pawn to e5, equalizing the game on the spot. Let white force the win. They will eventually lose. Knight f3. You go knight c6. And after bishop c4, I still recommend you play the two knights defense. In other words, my top recommendation for now against the Italian is the two knights. Again, I won't waste my time covering the knight c3 variation since I already covered it in my previous video. I just want to look at the d4 gambit line. This may happen immediately or after white castles short, e.g. castling short. If you carelessly play bishop c5, which is okay, you will run into the deuce gambit. That also transposes to the max range attack. It's not the deadliest gambit in the world, and frankly speaking, it's refutable, but you can avoid that. If you are a complete beginner and want to avoid tactics, you can play simple chess, bishop e7, after d4, you take, if knight takes, you castle short and take towards the center of the board with your b pawn. If pawn to e5, one knight maneuver that your coach never told you about is this one on the board. Yes, knight e4, knight c5 and knight e6. That is a very safe knight maneuver. Another one is knight g4, like in this position, because if h3, you can simply take that pawn for free. Looks like there's something going on here, but I mean, like NGO, there is always nothing going on. You have knight takes c4. So that's if you want to completely avoid the deuce gambit. But anyway, bishop c5 is the main line. Even if they play d4, the only thing you need to remember here is take with the bishop. That's all. Don't take with any of these pieces. You're going to run into some traps that they have prepared. So you just need to give up your bishop pair. That's the theory behind this. Knight takes, you take back with your knight. They always play moves like bishop g5, pawn to f4, open up that. But this is theoretically weak. For example, pawn to f4. They know you can't take. They want to take your knight. In this case, you can just play d6. So that if they take, you recapture like that, maintaining your pawn structure. Anyways, they do take. After that, they play bishop g5. Now putting more pressure on this knight. You can tell by the evil bar that this attack doesn't go anywhere. You just play queen e7. Even if it means taking back with a pawn, let it be so, because that will help you to pave the way for your rook. At worst, you are going to castle long. They play moves like c3, but you always have knight e6, attacking that. If bishop takes, you take back like that. Just like I said, this only helps you to pave the way for your king's rook. It's nothing. Knight a3, this is what they do. You have bishop d7 first. You can even play knight f4, etc. The whole plan is to castle long once the dust settles. What can they do? They mostly take on e6. Out of desperation, after which you take back with your queen and ready to castle long. That's why you don't see the deuce gambit at super grandmaster level. Anyway, by the way you support this channel is by joining one of our membership tiers on Patreon or simply buying my courses at www.KaspaChess.com or on my Patreon page. That really helps. Back to square one. After e4, e5, knight f3, bishop c5, bishop c4, and knight c6. White plays pawn to c3. So what now? Maybe there's something else that we can do against the c3 line. Well, here I propose that you go knight f6, attacking the undefended e pawn. If white continues with pawn to d4, you simply want to take like that. Yes, there's one move that looks dangerous at first sight, which is e5. But the main equalizing move in these kinds of positions is pawn to d5. For example, after d5 and pawn takes knight, you can simply take that powerful bishop, and this has been proven to be better for black, theoretically speaking, due to the space advantage and the bishop pair. If f takes g7, you simply go rook g8. Now you have a new point of attack, perhaps an indication that white should not castle short. If cd, you can go queen e7 first, getting rid of the queens if you like, or just take that pawn. It's free. I mean, if knight takes, you're going to take back with your queen or your bishop. It's up to you. If you want to keep queens on the board, you go bishop takes. And after castle short, you go queen f6. Rook e1 check can always be met with bishop e6. It's just a matter of time before you castle long. So this has been proven to be awesome for black. Never should you be afraid of pawn to e5 in the Italian game. Just go pawn to d5 and then oversimplify the game like that. I mean, even if white plays queen e2 here, you can just go bishop e6. That's the whole idea. Yeah, there are those lines where they go knight g5 trying to take your bishop, and after pawn takes they win a free bishop like that, but we are one tempo ahead. Here we can just go queen takes f6, so that if knight takes comes, we even take back with our queen. Queen takes, pawn takes, and lo, just like that, we have a clear passed pawn. If pawn takes, we take back with a knight. This is even worse, because next we might even win the poor rook. So once again, e5, d5 seals the deal. By the way, this is called the Greco Gambit. Once again, we are looking at this weird c3 Italian, where I recommended the move knight f6. Normal development, just attacking the e4 pawn. Of course, they are going to play d4 in this position. You don't want to retreat the bishop, you just want to take on d4 to oversimplify the game. And if pawn to e5, once again you go d5. Now, what if white takes on d4 with their pawn? First, you will just have a normal game. From here, go bishop b4 check. Checks are always good and forcing moves. If bishop d2, by the way, you can just take on e4. Queen e2, queen e7. Bishop takes, knight takes. There is nothing white can do to attack your two knights. Again, if queen e2, you have pawn to d5 or queen e7. If they play something like queen b3, again you have queen e7 and a discovery check coming. I've seen people playing bishop takes first. You can just take back. Yes, they will take back. And now you go pawn to a5. You start buying time on the queen before you develop other pieces and probably castle long or short. All these are just possibilities of what you can do if you do the right thing. After c takes d4 and bishop b4 check, white doesn't really need to play bishop d2. I mean, if they do that, you have knight takes e4. Remember, sometimes you can just play queen e7, not to complicate things, or just take that bishop. If they play the top played move knight c3, once again, you have knight takes e4. You have all the reasons to take that pawn. If they play queen e2, you always have queen e7. This is better for black. Castle short, knight takes c3, also attacking the queen. Queen takes, you just take back with your knight. Pawn takes, now you are attacking the rook. Rook b1, bishop a5. They can't pin your knight due to bishop attack. Rook attack, pawn to b6. Still preventing rook e1 pin. Pap, bishop g5. Maybe you go knight g6 and castle short. Or play the right move, pawn to f6 here. Why not? Because once the bishop moves, first you have bishop s6, bishop takes, attacking two rooks for nothing. So once again, if you see the c3 Italian on the board instead of the d3 Italian, don't be tempted to play the Lucchini Gambit, please. If you do that, you are going to lose. There are moves like bishop takes g8. So you want to play principal chess, remember to start with knight f6. It comes with an attack, and if they play d4, you simply take. These are the only opening moves you need to remember and memorize if need be. Sometimes after knight c3, feel free to take that knight immediately. And this is when you take on e4. This is the simplest you can do to avoid all those tensions. Again, queen e2 can easily be met with pawn to d5. Sometimes queen e7 works. Point is this, there can't be bishop takes due to queen takes. Even if they castle short, you're just going to castle short and there's no pin. So don't be afraid to play pawn to d5 in these kinds of lines. So after knight takes e4, you may see moves like castle short instead of castling short, you want to play pawn to d5. If you miss a move, white may gain initiative by playing pawn to d5 themselves. You don't want this to happen. Of course, here you can play knight e7, because after rook e1, you still have knight f6, and after bishop g5, of course, you can simply go knight g6. But what if they start pushing their h-pawn and that? You don't want to risk your chess like that. Of course, h4 can be met with h6, or simply pawn to d6, paving the way for your light squared bishop. After that, you go back to e5. It's like you are just giving back a pawn in this position. You don't want to play like this, even though it is playable. So this is why I'm encouraging to play pawn to d5 as quickly as you can before white plays pawn to d5. Sometimes after knight takes e4 in this particular position, of course white may play pawn to d5, but the difference is you are quick in development. Knight e7, white doesn't have rook e1 yet, so even if they play moves like castle short, you are just in time to play pawn to d6, because rook e1 can easily be met with pawn to f5 if you so wish, or knight c5. You don't always need to go back to the king side due to that pawn advancement that we saw earlier. Bishop g5 in this position, pawn to f6. The reason why you played pawn to d6 was to close the line, to block the light squared bishop, so you can easily castle short on the next move. If bishop e3, maybe you play pawn to b6 first, so that if they take, you take back with your b pawn and castle short safely. So that's how to counter the Greco's attack that may arise from the c3 Italian. You just go knight f6 once again. If they play pawn to d3, feel free to go d6 and castle short. That will just be a passive game for white. d4 is more aggressive in that it forces you to respond with correct moves. Bishop d2, you can just take. Knight c3, you can just take to oversimplify things. And to conclude, after e4, e5, knight f3, bishop c5, bishop c4, and knight c6. If knight c3 is played, again just go knight f6 to finish your development. And these are the most common lines. When you see these two knights, just know white is going to castle short or play pawn to d3 first, after which you go d6. Normal chess, if bishop g5, you go h6, trying to see what they are up to. Bishop h4, you know they want to play knight d5, right? So you can go pawn to g5. This is one move that is so underrated, yet so useful. Remember, you haven't yet castled short, so you are at liberty to play pawn to g5. If that's the only defensive move you have. Yeah, sometimes you can even play this move, pawn to g5, even if you have already castled short. But anyway, at this point, you can even start thinking of oversimplifying the game with moves like bishop e6. a6 was also playable, by the way. Point is, if bishop takes, they just helped you to put a pawn on a better square, not allowing knight d5 in the near future. If they play bishop g3, you can even play a5, queen d7, prepare to castle long, and all those things. And that's all for today, you guys. Let me know which episode you liked the most in the comment section down below. And if at all you would love to see more of these kinds of content where I compile my favorite videos in one collection, of course, to make it easier for you guys, let me know. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, bye bye.